She even wore blue today, you're right. So, God is. Today we're going to talk about God as our guide. You ever needed a guide? Ever been in a place where you had to have a guide? You needed a guide to help? Well, hopefully you have. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to visit one of our natural parks, or perhaps one of the historic treasures that we have here in the U.S. They're fantastic. Whenever you get there, as you all know that have done that, there's usually two types of tours that you can take. Number one, there's that self-guided tour. And then there's that guide, one that you can take with a tour guide. I can remember for a number of years we used to have trips where the seniors would go and I would go, and we'd take 2 or 3 vans, whatever it might have been. And one of our elders at the time was driving the van behind us, and we were in Gettysburg. Now, while we were in Gettysburg, I'd had the tour, all right? But I would pull up and I would point at something, and the van behind me was wondering what was going on. So my van, I'd be making up something, saying, you know, this is what took place here. You want to get a qualified guide to take you through, and there was a hole in the wall. I knew it had to be from a cannonball, so I explained to them that the cannonball was still inside. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. You want someone who kind of has an idea, but you want a good guide if you're going to do that. So I'm sure that some of you have done them, and they're very exciting. I've had that opportunity at Gettysburg. One of the best that I really enjoyed was whenever we was at the Little Bighorn. And the Little Bighorn up in Montana, and of course we know it as Custer's Last Stand, but the Little Bighorn, how special it was. And you have it about an 11-mile stretch where you're driving, and you would watch through the ravine where the troopers had fallen as they're moving back, hopefully for higher ground, but they would never get there. But now that tour was a little unusual, because what you did, you would go in, and the tour guide would have everyone that is going to drive through, and he would tell you, now look at your pamphlets. That way when you went through, you had an idea. But without that guide having told us some of the tidbits, we would have missed so much. Well, your spiritual journey is much the same way. Whenever you're on a spiritual journey, folks, there's 3 types of spiritual journey. One, we're all on a spiritual journey, and you may not have any help at all. I'm not going to address that today. That's self-explanatory. I'm going to address 2 areas. One, your self-guided tour, and one, your Jesus-guided tour. Let's talk about that self-guided tour. In Acts chapter 8, and if you just look at verses 29 through 38, I believe it is, you're going to find the account of Philip and the eunuch, the Ethiopian eunuch. And all that's going to go with it. The Ethiopian eunuch has been to Jerusalem to worship. He's on his way back to Ethiopia. And here's a couple verses that I've selected for you. This would be verses 30 and 31, I think. Then Philip ran up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you are reading? Philip asked. How can I, he said, unless someone explains to me? So he invited Philip to come up in the chariot and sit with him. All right, let's start right there. It's gone from being a self-guided tour. I want you to think about what he's doing. He's reading from Isaiah. He's got his Bible open, basically, is what we would say today. He's got his Bible open, and he is reading about, at that point, he's probably reading about Jesus. I would assume that he's reading about where the lamb will go into the slaughter. He's reading that because he's talking about Jesus. So as he's doing that, he's traveling along, but he's not got the whole picture yet. See, every day in our self-guided journey, we are faced with this. How did I get here? You ever wonder about that? How did I get here? Deb selected this. I thought, if I got there, I'd want to know how I got there. How did I get here? I want all of you to take just a moment and think about your journey so far in life. Let's go back to your high school days. How many of you, and we can do a show of hands, how many of you thought you'd be doing what you're doing today when you got out of high school? Okay, 1, 2, 3, about 4 of us. I knew I was going to be a preacher when I got out of high school. I'd already made up my mind. I was hoping God would get on board with it. So my grandma had already made up her mind I was going to be a preacher, so I was pretty certain about that. And it happened at the end of high school for me. But about 4 of us. Most of us have taken a journey that you wouldn't have expected. You would have thought something different. Every day you're going to be faced with some kind of decision. And I would imagine even in our congregation today, 250 neighborhood, that there are going to be those who are facing decisions right now that are sometimes overwhelming. And we don't even know about it. But you're facing them. You're making lifetime decisions. Am I going to stay in this marriage, or am I going to get out of it? Some may be wrestling with some of that. What am I going to do about my finances? How am I going to deal with this problem? I'm about to be laid off. What kind of job am I going to find? You're dealing with lifetime decisions each and every day of your life. So if we start thinking now from high school, most of you wouldn't have thought about being in the position that you're in right now. Your marriage, your job, your place of work. Then there's those others that have made let's say a wrong turn. What about alcohol or drugs or some type of addiction? None of us would have thought out of high school that we're going to end up in such a place. We would have never expected it. Not long ago I did the funeral of a high school star athlete from about 20 years ago. And he'd been the star athlete in that community. And the whole town turned out to that location for this young man. He was maybe right at 40. And they all turned out for him. But he died of drugs. They would have never thought he'd make that turn. He was the star athlete. He was the one that everyone was looking to. How did we get here? Then we get into that debt and unhappiness, those insecurities. Every one of you probably have some type of insecurity in your life. And you're saying, well, how did I get here? How did I get to that location? Folks, life is filled with twists, turns, and disappointments. Twists, turns, and disappointments. And many times the problem is that you're on a self-guided tour. You're going through life and you're doing your best to be your own guide. You're trying to guide yourself through a difficult situation. Now let's go back to the Ethiopian. Many of you can relate to what he's talking about. You've got the book of instructions. You've read it. And I always like to hear people say, you know, I don't know where to read, so I just will flip it open. And wherever it is, I'm hoping that God's speaking to me. Well, let me tell you what you're going to get out of it. Not much. All right, I don't want to offend you, but you're not going to get much out of that. You need to find a systematic study of God's Word. If you're going to try to guide yourself through this, at least get into a regular study. Because if I just say, well, here it is. Oh, this one's on do not worry, so that'll work for some of us. Yeah, we can't do that. That's not how it's going to work. Because that's a self-guided tour. And in your self-guided tour, you're going to find that you're going to make some turns that you shouldn't make. And you're looking at the instruction book and you're saying, why don't I have help? See, that's why we're not dealing with the first group. The first group doesn't even look at the instruction book. We are a group of people who are trying. Every one of us is saying, I'm here for a reason. I'm trying, Lord. I'm trying to get in touch with you. I'm looking at the instructions. But sometimes we miss whenever God is speaking to us. Why? Because this is our tour, self-guided tour. Self-guided tour. That I'm going to be the one making the decisions on whether to turn left or to turn right. And we're not looking for God to help us with that. Moving along in our journey, we're trying to figure out, and I'm trying to figure it out for myself. See, I've got the book. I've got the directions. I go to church. I've got a Bible. As a minister, most of you wouldn't pick up on this, but I always love it whenever people will tell me, well, Mike, I've got a Bible. Well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, are you reading it? Are you reading it? Everyone's got one. Grandma's got one that's full of obituaries. Just pick it up and shake it, and great-granddad's obituary will fall out of it. We've all got them. Most of them are about this big, set on the table. Unless the other neighbors are coming over, then it sits underneath the table. If I'm showing up, it's up front. So you get the idea, we've all got them. But the truth of the matter is, it's a self-guided journey that you're on. And folks, our self-guided journey is going to end up like Gilligan. It's going to be a shipwreck. It's going to be a shipwreck. And it's amazing to me, I still watch Gilligan once in a while. Lots of people can get on that island, but they can't get off. Don't be like Gilligan. That's what happens with a self-guided tour. So whenever I look around, I might say, well, look how well I'm doing. Look how life is going. How well things are. Folks, you're being deceived. You're missing. Anyone who's on a self-guided journey or tour is missing some of the most valuable things. As you drive through the cemetery in Gettysburg, you'll come to one place. I won't tell you which number it is. I'd have to make that up. But you'll come to one place where you're going to see a dog, a statue of a dog there. Now, if you've never taken the tour, you don't know about that dog. All you know is there's a statue of the dog in the cemetery. And we assume he was shot at Gettysburg. Maybe he was carrying a message. No, he come and laid on the chest of his wounded soldier. And you would have missed that. See, we miss a lot in self-guided tours. Now, what about what you've missed? I believe that by not having a Christ-guided tour, we miss so much. We miss the joy of the sunrise. We miss the joy of a quiet time. We miss the pleasantness that God has in store for us. Let's talk about my Jesus-guided journey. I really want to get more out of life than what I just see the average person having. So I need a guide to accomplish that, who can point out the wonderful, the interesting, the captivating things on my journey, where they'll be able to say, oh, look at this, and see what God is doing. On this journey, let's go to Proverbs, and here it is, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Now, you want a straight path instead of that back and forth? I've had that back and forth all day. I've had vertigo all morning, and I've taken my second pill so that I didn't stumble through my sermon. You don't want that back and forth. It makes you seasick. Trust me, I'm doing it. It makes you seasick. You want a straight path. Now, are you on a path where Jesus is the guide, where He is able to help us and to walk through this with us? Let's see what it says. Trust in Him. I want all of you to take a moment and think about how you are trusting in God today. You are ready to make that decision. You've got a decision that is before you that is rapidly approaching, whatever it might be. And you've kind of got an idea of where you need to head and what you need to do with it. Now, let's go a step farther. Let's put this matter to prayer. Maybe have a spiritual guide that's going to help us, someone that's going to help you open Scripture. Maybe it's Mom or Dad or Grandma Pickle. I don't know who it is. Have them help you open that Scripture. That you're going to be able to look and say, here's where God's guiding me. And trust me, you'll know. You'll have an idea that that path is straight. You're not going to stumble through this. In Psalms 25, it says He guides and teaches. 25 verse 9. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them His ways. Now wait, who's He guiding? Only the humble. So why is it saying that He guides the humble? Because folks, I have to be able to humble myself and say, Lord, I've tried this on my own and it didn't do too good. I can remember trying it on my own. And there's a few times I've been walking with the Lord and I decided to take a journey on my own. Anyone else ever done that? Most of us. Yeah, we've been walking along with the Lord and everything's looking pretty good and we think we've got this mastered. So I lose my humility and I turn to Mike. Mike could guide me through this. Thankfully, Jesus has been following and picks me up and brushes me off and sets me back on the right path. Because I stumbled, I fell. But it says that He will guide the humble in what is right. Now, He's not going to guide me in a crooked path. He's not going to guide me into some addiction. He's not going to guide me into some unhappiness. He's going to lead me. He's going to be right there walking beside me. That's what a guide does, is he walks with you. He walks with you. And He's going to walk through that time with us. See, folks, I think sometimes we've lost a great treasure because we no longer walk together. We say, we'll meet you there. We'll get in the car and we'll meet you there. You take your car and I'll take my car and you can take her car. And everyone arrives at the same place. We miss something in that fellowship and that union together. So He says He guides and teaches us. In John chapter 8, He will say these words in verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, He said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We'll never walk in darkness. It's only whenever we are walking in a darkness, in a fog, that we're going to stumble, folks. Whenever we're walking in the light that God has given us, it's not going to happen. So if we're walking together, what can we expect? Well, number one, if I'm walking somewhere with you, we're probably friends. We're friends. I believe that whenever you go to a funeral visitation, you are a friend who is walking with those who are grieving. You're there to walk with them during that time, to help them out in every way possible. You're walking as a friend. Whenever we're walking together, it may not be the words that are spoken, but just one or two that is a gentle counseling. You ever been with someone who has been able to help you make a decision and counsel you and direct you without really doing this? Where they've just gently guided you. How many times do we do that? That's who our counselor is. And as we're walking with Jesus, He's not going to make us feel like we have failed. He's going to make us feel like we can succeed because He's walking with us. You ever have someone just come up and say, man, I'm proud of you. You're doing a good job. Do you ever think that maybe the Lord has sent that person to speak to you as He's gently counseling you? Maybe from someone that you didn't expect it from. So He's going to discipline us, but He's going to walk with us. He's going to be our friend. He's going to counsel us. He's going to help us in this walk that we're taking. He's going to show us He is a comforter, the Scripture said. So as He walks along with me, folks, I've made some doozy of mistakes in my life. Is anyone else in that boat besides me? Yeah, I see a few heads nodding. I've made some mistakes that are real doozies. And you're not going to hear about them. I just want you to know that. I'm not going to tell you. I will tell you that I'm very glad to have my car back, but I'm not going to tell you what my mistakes are. All right? And I've made some doozies. Deb's not going to tell you either. So, she doesn't know all of them. So, there's some she can't tell you. You get the idea? But as I'm walking along with Jesus, He comforts me because He is my guide. He says, Mike, I can forgive that. I can forgive that. Mike, we can get to a new place. Mike, I can help you. Mike, let me help you forgive yourself. That's what my guide does, is He guides me through these spiritual rough waters. You ever done something when you think, God can't even forgive this? Most of us have things that have just burdened us so much. He can. And then you know who can't? You can't. So now the guide walks along and says, I'll get you there. I'll get you there. You'll forgive yourself. I will comfort you. As we walk together, He just gently guides me to a jungle that I created until He has led me out into a land that is fresh and a joy and happiness. Do you like life, folks? I've had my day when I didn't. I've seldom confessed that, but I've had my day when I didn't. But I love life. I enjoy what God has given us. I enjoy whenever I get up in the morning to see what He has given us that day. I like it better when He gives me sunshine, but when He gives me snow, I need the exercise. Yeah, so whatever it is, I can be glad. Well, let's stop and look and listen here. Let's look and listen. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Hearing this is the way, walk in it. I like to visualize Jesus walking with me. I like to know that He's walking by my side, not far from me. I've been telling you this. I've been trying to gently introduce you to it. Folks, I think you have more contact with God than you realize. And it took me a lot of years to realize that myself. But I think you have more contact with God than you've ever realized. There's not many of you who are trying, who are not on the self-guided tour. You're asking Jesus to come and walk alongside you. There's not many of you who have not heard His voice when He's saying, not that way, not that way. But we don't want to admit that. We don't want to say that that's the voice of God speaking to us. We would rather stick with the stereotype of Christianity. Folks, I'm telling you, it's God who is gently guiding you and saying, go left. No, make a right here. I'm not far from you. I'm close to your side. Attribute number 5 is God is our guide. I'm hoping that you'll realize that God is your guide. And I'm going to ask you to take a walk with Jesus. Now, I'm not even going to ask you to take a long walk with Him. Everybody get ready for this. I'm going to ask you for the rest of the month of February. Try walking with Him and not being self-guided. Those decisions that you are facing right now, talk them over with your guide. Listen for that still small voice. Take a moment every day to check in with Him and let Him gently guide you. Trust Him. He will not lead you into an addiction to a crime. He won't lead you into an unhappiness or failure. He won't lead you into sin. He'll lead you someplace where you'll rejoice and be glad. Now, if your life is already unhappy because of that self-guided tour, He's going to help you find some happiness. He's not going to ask you to divorce that guy or that woman, but He's going to help you find some meaning in that relationship. He's going to help you find some joy in that relationship. He'll help you find some peace in that relationship. If you are in an addiction, He's going to help you find a strength to address that. Folks, please try it for the rest of the month. Take a little walk with Jesus. Take a little walk with Him. Every one of us can feel the touch of the Master's hand. Let Him reach out. Right now, and I've been here. I've been to the place that I'm about to mention when I felt like I was being mired down in a quicksand and I could almost feel His hand lifting me out. What about you? I tell you, we'll walk brand new with a smile every day, and you'll be glad to say, this is the day the Lord has given. I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to be glad in it. Man, I'm happy for every day anymore. Happy for every day. I got older yesterday or last week, I'm happy for every day. Yeah. Because take a little walk with Jesus. Are you walking with Him? Or are you self-guided? Is He guiding or you? Oh, some of us would like to say that He is and He's not. We are. You will know the difference. Will you please stand as we have our invitation?